Amara grew up in Kampala with a heart that seemed too gentle for the world around her. She was the kind of young woman who noticed when someone was hurting, who stopped to help a stranger carry a heavy basket, who always shared even when she had little. Yet in her own home, those qualities were rarely praised. Instead, all attention seemed to circle around her elder sister, Chidinma. Chidinma was striking, bold, and loved being the center of the room. People often compared the two sisters, as though Amara's worth could only be measured against her sister's shine. The comparisons hurt, but what cut even deeper were Chidinma's sharp words. She would laugh at Amara for being too simple, rolling her eyes at her modest dresses or quiet ways. She mocked her for not chasing attention, for blending into the background. The worst moment came one afternoon when the family gathered at their uncle's house. Relatives filled the room with laughter and chatter, when Chidinma suddenly said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Nobody will ever marry a girl like you." The room went silent for a beat, then uneasy laughter followed. Amara sat still, forcing a small smile, but inside her chest, something cracked. She didn't argue. She didn't defend herself. Instead, she swallowed the pain and let it settle in her heart like a stone. But that night, lying awake, she made herself a quiet promise. Her life would not be defined by her sister's cruelty. Somewhere deep inside, Amara believed she was more than Chidinma's words. When Amara thought back to her childhood, the memories often felt like a long stage play where her sister was always the star, and she was just part of the background. From the time they were little, relatives would gush over Chidinma's beauty. "Look at those eyes, that smile," they would say. At family gatherings, uncles would call her a future queen, and aunties would fuss over her clothes and hair. Their parents, without even realizing it, joined in the chorus of praise. Chidinma was bold, charming, and loved the spotlight, so she made it easy for everyone to notice her. Amara, on the other hand, was different. She was quieter, more thoughtful, the type who would rather sit under a tree with a book than twirl in a new dress for an audience. But instead of seeing her gentleness as something special, people brushed it aside. They would pat her on the head and say, "That's Amara, the quiet one." Sometimes they compared her directly, whispering just loud enough for her to hear, "She's not as good-looking as her sister." Each word stuck to her like a shadow she couldn't escape. Growing up this way left marks on her heart. She learned early how it felt to be invisible, to smile even when her spirit felt small. There were moments she wanted to shout, "I matter too," but the words never left her lips. Instead, she carried her insecurities silently, folding them neatly into herself like hidden scars. Yet, even in those painful years, something else was being planted in her, a quiet determination. Amara didn't know how or when, but she felt deep inside that she would prove she was more than the labels thrown at her. She began to notice the little ways she was different, how people felt comfortable telling her their troubles, how children clung to her hand, how her kindness opened doors her beauty never needed to. These moments were small, but they became her private treasures, reminders that she was not as invisible as people made her feel. The comparisons never stopped, and sometimes they stung so much she cried alone at night. But in the silence of those tears, Amara was also learning something powerful. She was learning how to build strength not from applause, but from resilience. She was learning how to live without needing the approval of others. And even though the world seemed determined to place her in her sister's shadow, Amara carried a quiet fire within her. One day, she promised herself that fire would burn bright enough for everyone to see. Amara never imagined that a trip to Nairobi would change her life. She had gone there to volunteer at a community event, helping organize food drives and teaching young children. It was the kind of work that made her heart feel alive. She wasn't there to impress anyone, just to serve quietly in the background as she always did. But that's where she met Tay. Tay wasn't the kind of man who needed to announce himself. Yes, people whispered that he was a successful entrepreneur, that he owned several businesses across East Africa, but he carried himself with humility. He didn't stand apart from the volunteers. Instead, he rolled up his sleeves, carried boxes, and knelt down to tie a child's shoelaces. That's what caught Amara's eye first. Not his wealth, not his status, but the way he treated people as though they truly mattered. At first, their conversations were simple. He asked her why she chose to volunteer, and she shyly explained how helping others made her feel closer to her purpose. Tay listened intently, as if her words were the most important thing in the world. Unlike others who overlooked her, he noticed her patience, her intelligence, and the quiet strength in the way she moved through life. Slowly, their talks grew longer, about books, dreams, faith, and even fears. He made her laugh in ways she hadn't laughed in years, and she found herself opening up to him in a way she never had with anyone else. Their friendship blossomed naturally, like a seed planted in good soil. Before long, it became clear that what they shared was deeper than simple companionship. Tay admired her heart, and Amara found in him a partner who saw her true worth, not in comparison to anyone else, but for who she really was. Every time he looked at her, she felt a kind of reassurance she had never known before, as though his gaze washed away all the cruel words that had haunted her for years. But even with this happiness growing inside her, Amara kept it hidden from her family. She could already imagine Chidinma's mocking laughter if she ever mentioned Tay. She could hear her sister saying things like, "What would a man like that want with you?" The thought of her joy being poisoned by ridicule was too much to bear. So she kept their relationship quiet, guarding it like a precious secret. In private moments, she sometimes wondered if hiding it was a mistake, but then Tay would smile at her, or squeeze her hand, and all her doubts melted away. For the first time in her life, she didn't need the approval of her family to feel valuable. With Tay by her side, Amara began to believe that maybe, just maybe, love wasn't about being the most beautiful or the loudest in the room. It was about being truly seen, and finally she was back in Kampala. Life hadn't changed much in Amara's family home. Chidinma was still the center of attention, always talking about the men chasing after her, the gifts she received, and how she was destined to marry someone rich and powerful. Relatives listened with admiration, nodding and laughing as if every word she spoke was gospel truth. Amara usually stayed quiet, sitting in the corner, her presence almost invisible in the noisy room. One evening during a family gathering, the mockery took a cruel turn. Chidinma, dressed in a bright gown and jewelry that sparkled under the lights, leaned back in her chair and smirked at Amara. "Even if a man looks at you," she said loud enough for everyone to hear, "it will be out of pity." For a second, the room froze. Then laughter broke out, sharp and stinging. Even some of the older relatives chuckled, as though cruelty was entertainment. Amara felt her stomach tighten, but she stayed calm. She lowered her eyes and forced a small smile, pretending it didn't hurt. Inside, though, the words sank deep. They reminded her of every comparison, every time she had been overlooked. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, but she knew it would only lead to more insults. So she said nothing. She let them believe she was weak, that she had accepted her place in her sister's shadow. What no one knew was that Amara was carrying a secret, a joy so precious that their mockery couldn't reach it. Every word Chidinma threw at her only made her more determined to keep her surprise hidden until the right moment. She thought of Tay, of the way he looked at her as though she was the only woman in the world, and her heart steadied. Their laughter could not erase the truth she held in her hands. She was loved deeply and sincerely by a man who saw her worth. Amara began to prepare quietly, keeping her plans to herself. She helped with chores, joined conversations when needed, and moved through her days as if nothing unusual was happening. To her relatives, she was still the same quiet, simple girl they underestimated. But inside, she carried a secret smile, a private confidence that grew stronger each day. She knew there would come a time when all their mocking words would fall silent, not because she shouted back, but because reality itself would speak for her. As Chidinma continued to brag about her endless suitors, Amara listened with patience. She didn't interrupt, didn't argue, didn't even let her eyes betray what she knew. But in her heart, she whispered to herself, "Your time is coming, Amara, and when it does, they will finally see who you are." It happened on a quiet evening, far from the noise of family gossip and judgment. Amara and Tay were sitting by the edge of Nairobi's lake, the sky painted in soft shades of orange and pink as the sun dipped below the horizon. They had been talking and laughing like they always did, but there was a different kind of energy in the air that evening, something tender and serious that made Amara's heart beat faster. Tay reached for her hand, holding it gently, and looked into her eyes with a calm intensity. "Amara," he said softly, "I've watched you give so much of yourself to the world. I've seen your kindness, your strength, and your heart. I don't want a life without you." Then, from his pocket, he pulled out a small, elegant ring. The moment felt timeless, as if the world around them had disappeared, leaving only the two of them suspended in that perfect moment. Amara's breath caught. Her hands shook as she took the ring, trying to find the words that could express the flood of emotions inside her. It wasn't just love she felt. It was something deeper, something she had never fully allowed herself to believe. That someone truly saw her, understood her, and valued her for who she really was. The years of feeling invisible, the constant comparisons to Chidinma, the whispered words of doubt from relatives, all of it seemed to fade away. Here was a man who loved her soul, not her looks, not her charm, not the way she measured up to anyone else. Tears filled her eyes, and she leaned into him, letting herself absorb the warmth of that moment. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Yes, I will marry you." The word felt like a declaration of victory over every cruel word that had ever been spoken to her. They laughed softly together, overwhelmed with happiness, and for a while neither spoke, just holding hands and watching the water ripple under the last light of day. Then, Tay suggested they keep the news private for now. They wanted to enjoy the intimacy of their joy without interference, without family opinions or gossip clouding their happiness. Amara agreed immediately. It felt freeing to have something so precious and hers alone, a secret treasure that belonged only to them. As they walked back through the quiet streets toward their temporary apartment, Amara's mind wandered. She imagined the day she would finally share the news, imagining the stunned faces, the disbelief, and yes, perhaps even Chidinma's mocking expression. But for now, she allowed herself to savor the private thrill of being truly loved. She realized that this moment, this promise of life together, was more than a proposal. It was a turning point. A life that had often felt small and overlooked was now bursting with possibility, and for the first time in years, Amara felt completely, undeniably seen. In the quiet of that night, she whispered to herself, "This is just the beginning." When the invitations arrived, they were nothing short of stunning. Thick, creamy cardstock with gold lettering, each envelope tied with a delicate ribbon, exuded elegance and care. Amara had chosen them herself, wanting every detail to reflect not only her joy, but the love she and Tay shared. She had spent weeks planning it quietly, making sure it would be perfect, an announcement that would speak louder than any words of doubt or mockery she had ever endured. The moment her family opened the invitations, the reaction was immediate. Chidinma, always quick to voice her opinions, laughed first. "Oh, it's probably just a small wedding with some broke man," she said, tossing the envelope onto the table as if it were meaningless. Relatives nearby chuckled, nodding, expecting another ordinary announcement that would match the story they had long told themselves about Amara's place in the family. But as whispers began to spread, the mood shifted. Guests and distant relatives started murmuring in surprise, eyes widening as they read the names and detail. The groom, it turned out, was not just a successful man, but a respected entrepreneur from a prominent family. People who knew the business world in East Africa began to realize the significance. Tay's reputation preceded him, his intelligence, his achievements, his generosity, and suddenly the laughter and scoffing felt small and misplaced. Amara watched quietly from the corner, a soft smile playing on her lips. She had expected some reaction, perhaps shock, but the stunned silence that followed felt even sweeter. She had spent years being underestimated, overlooked, and dismissed, yet here she was, announcing a union that no one could ignore. Every insult Chidinma had ever thrown, every whispered comparison from relatives, seemed to fade into irrelevance. The truth of her worth was now visible, and it was undeniable. Even Chidinma's confidence wavered. She tried to mask it with another laugh, saying, "Well, let's see if he can actually support her lifestyle," but her voice lacked conviction. Eyes darted around the room, comparing the envelopes, reading the details aloud in hushed tone. Slowly, the reality sank in. Amara's life was about to change in ways no one had predicted, and the family that had mocked her now had to face the truth. For Amara, it was not about revenge. It was about joy, about finally stepping into a life that reflected her value and happiness. Each envelope sent out was a quiet declaration of triumph, proof that years of patience, self-belief, and quiet strength could lead to a moment no one could diminish. She had held her secret carefully, and now, finally, it could speak for itself. The laughter and the whispers would eventually settle, but the reality of her love and the life she was building with Tay would remain undeniable. Amara closed the last envelope, feeling a rush of pride and relief. The stage was set, and the world was about to witness something she had always known deep inside. Her life was hers to shape, and no one, not even Chidinma, could define her worth. The morning of the wedding in Kampala was alive with energy. The streets buzzed as luxury cars rolled in, their polished exteriors gleaming under the bright sun. Guests arrived from near and far, their excitement mixing with curiosity. Inside the grand hall, chandeliers sparkled, flowers filled every corner, and the air smelled faintly of fresh roses and expensive perfume. Everything had been planned to perfection, a day to celebrate love, joy, and new beginning. Chidinma arrived first, of course. She had spent hours choosing a dress designed to turn heads, a bold, glittering gown that caught the light with every movement. Her hair and makeup were flawless, and she carried herself with the confidence of someone used to being the center of attention. She smiled at everyone she passed, expecting to bask in admiration, assuming that all eyes would inevitably follow her. "This is my day too," she thought, though the event was not hers to claim. Then the music shifted, softer and more poignant, signaling the entrance of the bride. The hall quieted, and every conversation paused. Amara stepped forward, radiant in a gown that seemed to glow from within. The simple elegance of her dress complemented her natural beauty, highlighting not just her appearance but her presence, the kindness, strength, and quiet confidence that had always been hers but often overlooked. As she walked down the aisle, whispers rippled through the crowd. Heads turned, eyes widened, and even Chidinma froze for a moment, caught off guard. All the careful planning, the dazzling gown, the attempts to shine, none of it mattered now. Amara held herself with a grace that drew people in effortlessly. Guests smiled, some even wiping away a tear, captivated not by glamour, but by the undeniable aura of someone who had fought through years of comparison and emerged stronger and more beautiful than ever. Chidinma's smile faltered slightly, the confidence she had carried all morning shaken by the simple truth. The attention had shifted, and for the first time, it was not on her. She tried to regain her composure, adjusting her gown, but it was clear that the room's eyes were drawn to Amara. Every gaze followed her toward Tay, who waited at the altar, his own expression soft with awe and love. Amara's heart pounded, not from nerves, but from the overwhelming feeling of being fully seen. The laughter, the mockery, and the comparisons from years past had all led to this moment, where she stood at the center of a room full of people, not for status or beauty alone, but because she was loved and respected for who she truly was. By the time she reached the altar, every doubt, every whispered insult, every hurtful comment from the past felt distant, irrelevant. Today, Amara was not living in her sister's shadow. She was the light everyone noticed, the star of a story she had written for herself, with love guiding every step. The wedding had begun, and with it, a new chapter where Amara's worth was clear for all to see. As the ceremony continued, the anticipation in the hall grew. Guests whispered among themselves, admiring the decorations, the music, and the elegant setting. Then, it was time for Tay to be formally introduced. When the announcement came, a hush fell over the room. "Please welcome Mr. Tay Okoye," the usher said, his voice steady but commanding. The crowd froze for a moment, then gasps and murmurs rippled through the hall. It didn't take long for everyone to realize who he was. Tay was not just a successful man. He was the CEO of a major East African company, a respected figure in business circles, known for his intelligence, generosity, and influence. People exchanged shocked glances, some whispering, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Chidinma, standing near the front, felt her confidence waver. Her eyes widened as the reality hit her. Her plain sister, the quiet girl everyone had overlooked for years, was marrying a man far beyond anything she had ever imagined for herself. The relatives who had once laughed at Amara's simplicity suddenly found themselves scrambling for her attention. Aunts and uncles who had teased her, cousins who had whispered behind her back, they all now smiled and complimented her, their words coated with admiration. "What a fine choice," one relative murmured. "He's truly remarkable." Amara felt the shift around her but remained calm, her gentle smile hiding the satisfaction she felt. She had never sought revenge, yet in this moment, the recognition she had always deserved was impossible to ignore. Chidinma's usual smugness faltered further. She tried to maintain her poise, adjusting her dress and tossing her hair, but it was clear to everyone that she had been blindsided. For once, she was no longer the center of attention. All eyes followed Amara and Tay, their energy, their presence, their love drawing everyone in. The tables had turned, and Chidinma could only watch as the sister she had belittled finally stepped into the light. Amara noticed the subtle change in the room, the way people now looked at her with respect, curiosity, even envy. Yet she did not let it inflate her pride. She felt a quiet satisfaction instead, a confirmation that her worth had never been tied to comparisons or insults. Tay took her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze, grounding her amidst the sudden flurry of admiration. In that moment, the hall wasn't just witnessing a wedding, it was witnessing a transformation. Amara, once overlooked and underestimated, now stood fully recognized. The ego of the sister who had once mocked her was quietly shattering, while Amara's quiet strength, kindness, and resilience shone brighter than any jewel or glittering gown in the room. She had not only claimed her happiness, but had also reminded everyone that true worth is seen, appreciated, and cannot be ignored. The reception was in full swing when Chidinma decided to make her move. She laughed a little too loudly, trying to mask her discomfort, and made a few jokes about how surprising the wedding was, as if it were all just a funny twist of fate. "I guess even Amara can find someone," she said with a forced smile, trying to appear casual. But everyone who looked at her could see through the act. Her envy was thinly veiled, her irritation obvious. Every chuckle she forced, every sarcastic remark, only revealed how unsettled she really was. Amara had watched silently for a moment, her smile soft and calm. She had expected this, had imagined Chidinma's attempts to downplay or belittle her, but she didn't feel anger or resentment anymore. Instead, she felt clarity. She took a deep breath, excusing herself from the conversation she had been having with a few close guests, and walked toward the microphone. The room quieted instantly. Something about the way she moved carried authority, poise, and quiet strength. "I have something I want to say," Amara began, her voice steady, catching the attention of everyone in the hall. "For years," she continued, "I was told nobody would marry me. I was told I was too simple, too quiet, too plain. I heard it from family, from relatives, even from the person I thought should have been my biggest supporter. She glanced at Chidinma, who shifted uncomfortably, trying to maintain a smile that didn't reach her eyes. But today, Amara said, her voice softening but filled with power, I learned that love is not about looks or status. It is about who sees your true soul, who values your heart and your character. And today, I am proud to say that I am loved for exactly who I am. A hush fell over the room. Guests stopped talking, turning their attention fully to Amara. Even Chidinma lowered her head, unable to meet anyone's gaze. The shame was clear. Her attempts at humor vanished under the weight of the truth Amara had delivered so gracefully. People began to clap slowly, first out of respect, then out of genuine admiration. Whispers of support and congratulations filled the hall. Some relatives who had mocked her in the past now looked at Amara with newfound recognition. But Amara didn't need their approval anymore. She had spoken her truth, and that was enough. Chidinma remained silent, her usual confidence stripped away, replaced by a quiet awareness of the years she had wasted belittling her sister. Amara returned to Tay's side, taking his hand and smiling, feeling lighter than she had in years. In that moment, closure settled around her like a warm embrace. She had faced the ridicule, spoken her truth, and emerged unshaken. For the first time, she realized that the power of her life had always been in her hands, and nothing, not envy, not mockery, could ever take that away. The wedding night glowed with happiness. Music filled the grand hall, and guests laughed and danced, swirling in elegant dresses and polished shoes. Children ran between tables, couples held each other close, and the air was alive with celebration. Amara moved through the crowd with Tay by her side, her hand in his, feeling a joy she had never known before. Every smile, every cheer, reminded her how far she had come and how much of her own life she had finally claimed. For years, she had lived in comparison, her sister's beauty, her relatives' whispers, the endless reminders that she was too simple or not enough. But tonight, none of that mattered. She was not living for approval or recognition. She was living for love, for connection, for the life she and Tay were building together. The burden of jealousy and judgment that had weighed on her for so long felt light, almost invisible, as if it had never existed. As the celebration carried on, Amara looked around at the faces of friends and family, the sparkling decorations, and the joy radiating from everyone she loved. She realized something important. True happiness didn't come from proving anyone wrong. It came from living fully, honestly, and with an open heart. In that moment, she felt a quiet strength, a deep contentment that no insult or comparison could ever take away. Later, as she held Tay close, she whispered to herself, a gentle smile on her face. Sometimes the best revenge isn't anger. It's living a life so full of love and respect that envy has no place beside you. For the first time, Amara felt completely free. Her story was hers alone, and it was just beginning. The laughter, the dancing, and the love around her were proof that a life lived with courage, kindness, and patience could outshine any shadow cast by others.